Welcome to part two of Citizens Forum this week, being filmed on Tuesday, March the 19th in the beautiful Memorial Arena on Blanchard. I'd just like to thank our volunteer crew and the Shaw staff that makes this all possible. Our second guest this week is Bill Finley. Bill is the owner of Hemp and Company, which is a clothing store, mostly clothing, but other things as well, on Government Street, kind of at the bottom end of downtown. Hemp and Company deals mostly in natural products. And Bill, maybe you'd like to start off just by telling us the benefits of.
I'd love to, and thanks for having me on the show, second time around, so I'm feeling like right in here.
Yeah.
We deal in natural fiber clothing, and we've been in business for 14 years. We have 3 locations in Greater Victoria area. Government and Ford is our mothership. I like to deal in products that a farmer has touched. So what we have are basically agricultural products as opposed to petroleum-based products.
So you mean polyesters and
like
nylons?
As in the polyesters and nylons, etc. And hemp, which forms our name, we do have other natural fibers that we carry as well, but hemp is certainly, you know, our mainstay. And it's one of those very unique products because everybody will get a little smile on their face because they link it to marijuana, and marijuana and hemp are related plants. But hemp has this long, fascinating history, and the oldest textile found was about 8,000 years ago, and it was a hemp textile.
When you say textile, you mean
a piece of fiber clothing as opposed to, say, a fur clothing from an animal.
So the first clothing made out of a grown product is hemp.
Is hemp.
Okay.
As far as archaeologists can determine.
Okay.
And the Chinese invented paper, and 2,000 years ago, and lo and behold, it was hemp that was the fiber that was used in order to create paper.
Okay, so hemp is used for clothing, hemp is used for paper. Hemp is also used a lot for plastics.
Yes.
And in fact, in a lot of cars, even today, parts of the body and parts of the interior, the dashboard, etc., can be made out of hemp oil plastics, right?
Hemp oil plastics, and also it's a very lovely insulative material, and so I know that BMW and Mercedes-Benz use the hemp fiber as insulation in their vehicles to keep the heat from rising through the floorboards and toasting your feet, because it's such it's a better natural insulator than most other products. So it has many wonderful attributes.
In the 1930s, I think hemp became the first in the United States, the first, was it billion-dollar crop? That's how popular it was. That's how widely grown and widely used it was in the early 1900s.
Yeah,
it was the #1 crop.
It was. It probably didn't quite make the $1 billion. The $1 billion was a Popular Science magazine cover that said the $1 billion crop, and I think they were anticipating if they kept using it, it probably would become $1 billion. Not sure that ever maybe made it because, as you're aware, it was cut off at the knees in the 1930s. It was widely used. The British and French who came to what now became North America in the early days were required by the laws of their country to grow hemp because it was so required. It was used for ropes. Doesn't break down in water the way other natural products do. So for sailing ships, it was the ropes. It was the sails. The word canvas, it comes from the word cannabis. And so the sails on the sailing ships, the paintings that were done on canvas back in the Middle Ages would have been done on hemp canvas. Paper was on the ships. The sailors would have worn hemp uniforms. Mainstay crop. In the U.S. history, which we can rely on a little bit, we know that both George Washington and Thomas Jefferson were hemp farmers, They grew hemp crops. Very, very likely, 99% sure that Betsy Ross created the original American flag. Would have been a hemp flag printed on or created on hemp textile.
So we're looking at a crop that had 1,000,001 uses 100 years ago,
Yes.
and should have 1,000,001 uses today too, but it was made illegal in the 1930s?
Yes, 1936, I believe, or perhaps 37, through the marijuana tax law in the United States. They banned hemp as well as banning marijuana.
Now, I thought until this very moment that the two were exactly the same. The marijuana was part of the hemp plant. Is that not correct?
Well, they are, I'd like to say that they're relatively speaking the same genus, but it's like red roses, pink roses, white roses. You have a rose plant, but you have lots of varieties within the rose plant. And with the hemp type plants, you have marijuana, which is grown very, very specifically, primarily to increase the THC, the chemical that's naturally occurs in all hemp plants, is intensified in marijuana so that you get the medicinal slash party-going drug. Recreational drug.
Yeah, good drug.
All hemp plants have some, but in what we call industrial hemp, grown very differently from marijuana, there's very, very little THC. In fact, by law in Canada, it has to be below 0.03%.
So very small.
Very, very small. Apparently you need at least 5%, 4 to 5% to even get the kind of buzz that we would get in the 60s and 70s from marijuana.
We'll do some experimentation after the show.
Yeah.
We'll smoke my shirt, which
is
hemp and organic cotton, I think.
This is a hemp and organic cotton shirt. I'm wearing a hemp shirt myself, t-shirt, 100% hemp pants, and still natural, but I'm wearing a merino wool sweater today. So.
Okay. So I've heard many, many times that the reason for making marijuana illegal in the 1930s in the United States by the same corrupt Congress and Senate and presidents that they have today was actually to get rid of the hemp industry, because it competed with a lot of other very powerful industries in the United States, and they just didn't want that competition anymore.
It seems very strangely tied together that hemp was banned through this rather obscure marijuana tax law, and the competition was trees are grown to make paper, and if we use agricultural products for paper, such as corn stalk and hemp stalks and flax plants, you maybe didn't have to cut down so many trees. So you had a lot of information, or a lot of input from the tree people.
The forest companies wanted to get rid of hemp. It was a competition.
Randolph Hearst owned tens of thousands of acres of trees, and he also published, used lots of newsprint for his newspapers. And one of the other big players, it seems, was the chemical companies, Dow Chemical, for instance, DuPont Chemical, had very recently in those days had invented nylon. And nylon quickly surpassed the use of hemp for ropes, for textiles, etc. And so to get rid of a competitor, it was banned. And there are certain historical tie-ins between those chemical companies and the FBI and the passing of this particular piece of legislation. So what happened was all of a sudden you had farmers growing a very, very legal crop. It had been grown by their first president, George Washington, and now it was illegal. And so all of that got lost, and all countries in the world pretty much followed suit. Canada right on the heels, Great Britain, all countries in Europe except for France, and communist countries. So big industry in Russia, Ukraine, the old Soviet Union area, Poland, Romania, they continued to grow hemp, and of course China. So huge advantage. They continued to utilize the plant, and for the last 65, 70 years, most Western countries didn't have it.
My own feeling about all of this is that there's absolutely no reason for marijuana to be illegal. If tobacco and alcohol aren't illegal, then marijuana should not be, and obviously there's absolutely no reason for hemp to be illegal to grow. But now in Canada it isn't, and there is an industry growing back up again, and maybe you can tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, it's Canada and most countries in Europe about 15, 17 years ago began realization, this is not hemp, this is not marijuana. Why are we banning a plant that's so useful? And so they began to legalize the growing of hemp. In Canada today, it's, I believe it's still governed by Health Canada, which seems strange, it's not Agriculture Canada. Yeah. If you're a farmer and you want to grow hemp, there are certain restrictions. You have to have a farm larger than 10 acres. You have to have a criminal record check to make sure you're not doing something illegal. You have to buy your seeds from the government, and you also have to have the GPS coordinates of your field identified before you plant so that they can check to make sure by surveillance that everything's okay.
All of that sounds a little bit crazy, but
a bit crazy. And they come twice a year to check the seeds to make sure that THC level is lower than the, I think it's, as I said, 0.03%, I believe. So if you want to grow wheat, if you want to grow corn, you just go ahead and do it. If you want to grow hemp in Canada, there are restrictions. However,
but you can grow it, and is there an industry building up to make the clothes, make the plastics?
Yeah, in Canada right now, we're still in the infancy. And just to backtrack slightly, America, US, has still not allowed their farmers to grow hemp. It's easier in the United States of America to get a medical marijuana license to grow pot than it is, it's totally impossible in all 50 states to grow hemp. So coming into Canada, it's still in its infancy, and primarily farmers are growing it for the seed production, and the seed is a very nutritious food source, full of protein, full of omega-3, 6, and 9 oils. Excellent food source if you're cutting back on meats and you need but still need the proteins. Hemp is excellent. It also, the seeds are crushed into oils, which are a food source and also used for body care products. So wonderful skin cream, shampoos, etc. Again, the omega oils that are involved in it are excellent for body care products. So we're kind of restricted in Canada, primarily because we don't have textile mills to take the stalk of the plant, these long, thin fibers that are grown in the plant, and turn them into textiles. So until that happens in Canada, we won't be able to do, say, 100% produced in Canada.
Now, I'm always concerned about, for example, this, any clothing I buy. I prefer cotton over polyesters, but I know cotton is grown with a lot of pesticides, etc.
Yeah.
What is the process for making hemp clothing? Is it a fairly clean process? And the growing of hemp, is it fairly gluten-free?
Yes, it is one of the cleanest growing plants that there is. First of all, it grows tremendously well. We used to use the word weed, meaning marijuana, right? Well, basically, hemp is kind of like a weed. In other words, if we consider a weed being a plant that'll grow pretty much under any condition and anywhere you want. It grows very quickly, it grows very densely together, and it grows in almost all climatic zones. So it doesn't mind the heat, doesn't mind the cold, primarily can use whatever rainfall is available.
And we all know it grows very well everywhere in BC.
Everywhere in BC would be perfect. And it doesn't have a lot of natural pests. So you don't need to spray it for, all the types of bugs. Now with cotton, very sensitive plant. The pretty much get wiped out by the cotton boll, and so they had to have.
How about the making of the material? Is that a fairly clean process as well?
To the best of my knowledge, I've never actually been in a factory where they've been weaving the textile. Again, we have to bring in all of our fabrics from overseas. The pants I'm wearing are 100% hemp, Romanian grown. I've never been to Romania. I'm not sure what the process is. In China, which began so much of the knowledge about textiles from silks and cottons and hemps, they are the world's leader in making really top quality fabrics. And generally speaking, hemp, being a bit rough and scratchy, is often blended with cotton so that you get some of the softness of the cotton with the durability of the hemp.
Well, I'm sensitive, and I find this shirt and the two others I have, which are exactly the same except a different color, I'm very, very comfortable to wear. We've only got a couple of minutes left, so maybe you can tell us about some of the products you sell in your store. And I'd like to begin just by mentioning there's a hemp bicycle.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's actually a bamboo bicycle. The frame is made of bamboo, but there is hemp fibers to bind it together. It's made by some young fellows in Vancouver, and pretty soon they're going to be all over the streets of Victoria because they're strong, durable, and natural, and pretty cool.
Yeah, sounds like a great idea.
Yeah. We at Hemp & Company for 14 years now we've been doing this, and we make the clothing that we make, we only manufacture in Canada. I am so strong on this that my feeling that we've lost so much of our industries to overseas, and I'm not in opposition to that at all. But I think if we can do it at home, let's do it at home. And we know that we can make clothes at home. Hemp & Company does. It employs my neighbors, and then they can come shopping at my store. We, using the hemp oils, we have half a dozen locally based soap companies that make soaps and creams and shampoos, from Tofino to Salt Spring Island to Trail, BC to Victoria, making wonderful products using the hemp oils. So we shop locally in our store with our suppliers, and we're big on promoting shopping local in any fashion that we can.
Bill, I'm afraid we've only got like 40 seconds left, so...
I've got another 2 hours to I can talk though, Jack.
And you just used it up. So folks, thank you very much for watching this segment of Citizens Forum, Hemp & Company, natural products with a historical bent, and really the history is as interesting as the products. Thanks very much for watching this segment, and thank you, Bill Finley. Welcome to segment 3 of Citizens Forum, being filmed on March 19th in the Memorial Arena. Our guest in this segment is Allan Gallupe. Allan Gallupe. Yeah. Allan is with the North Park Neighborhood Association, and we're going to be talking about a very large development that's going to be taking place right at the corner, or maybe not taking place, right on the corner of Pandora and Vancouver, where St. Andrew's Private School has been for a long time. The school is now closing, and the land may be sold to a Vancouver developer who wants to build what seems like a fairly major project for what is a residential neighborhood. And Allan, maybe you can start to fill us in on what's going on.
Yeah, so when the neighborhood association, the North Park Neighborhood Association, found out that the school wanted to sell the site, they had a visioning meeting about what they would like to see on the site, what they thought would be an appropriate development on the site.
What the neighbors thought would be.
What the neighbors thought would be a good an appropriate development for the site. And this was before any developers were you know, in the ring or anything. So they got together and they imagined a development that had appropriate density on Pandora Street with possibly some commercial. They imagined 2, possibly 3-story townhouses on Mason Street side, which would conform with the two-story buildings on Mason Street and the very small Mason Street, and fit in with the park that's there, the Franklin Park that is there, and also have some kind of a walkway through so that the area could still be accessed through by people walking through, because Mason Street is a great greenway type of street with people bicycling, using their walkers and their wheelchairs and walking through that area because it's a very nice quiet street. So that was sort of where the neighborhood started with it.
For one thing, you saw sort of, here, if this is Pandora, then you saw higher buildings on Pandora, but going down so that on Mason, which is a very quiet residential street, it would be maybe 2 stories.
Yes, it would be something that would fit in with the neighborhood. So I think
that isn't what's being planned.
I think the neighborhood association, no, unfortunately it isn't. I think the neighborhood association wanted to see something that would really be something that would be a model for density, a model for development for the rest of the area. This is kind of on the fringe of the North Park area and the boundary, and so they wanted to see something that would be really appropriate. This was really an opportunity. This site hadn't come available for 100 years or whatever. It had been a school. The Catholic Church had owned it for years and years. I think the building that's on there was built in the 30s, but there had been a previous Catholic school there since the 1880s or so, as my understanding is. So this was really a unique opportunity to do something that satisfied both the need for density within the neighborhood and also at the same time was a really appropriate kind of density.
And I agree with you 100%. What's needed is something that's a little bit different, maybe higher density, but also something that works for the neighborhood and does not conflict with the neighborhood. And that's true right through all of our towns and cities right across the country. So we've got to do things better, and here was a chance.
Yeah, so here's this development that's bordering an artery, Pandora, but on the other side is this very, very quiet and small street called Mason Street, and which is barely more than a lane and a half. And then there's Vancouver Street, which is very much a bike and people walking kind of street. It's actually designated a people priority greenway and bikeway. And so how will a development fit in with those kinds of priorities? Well, we were very surprised when we found out that a large Vancouver development company had an option to build on the land, had completed a deal with the Catholic Church for an option to build, and we had a meeting with them. The neighborhood had a meeting, good turnout. In fact, we had 2 meetings with them. And each of those meetings were entirely disappointing for the neighborhood association and many of the neighbors because they appeared to not really understand or care to understand what it was that the neighborhood was saying. And what they in fact said was the only thing they could do was a 6-story development that took up the entire half a block, practically unprecedented in our city. Maybe the Hudson is one example you can give of a development that is a half a block in size and 6 stories. But the Hudson's clearly downtown. This is in a residential neighborhood and butting up against residential houses, 2-story houses.
So what they want to build is basically just 6 stories right around.
That's right.
And on Mason Street, the houses there will now be fronted by a 6-story
wall.
Yeah, and what you had hoped for was something higher on Pandora, but again sloping down to make it more human scale on the Mason side. Now, who's the developer?
The developer is called BOSA.
Okay.
They have a large development happening right now in Vic West, 30-story development, I'm understanding, something like that. They they do millions and millions of dollars worth of development. This is, for them, just another day in the life of business development. For us, it's our community. For us, we feel that we should be able to have some input into what is going on here.
I'm sure you found out that really you don't.
No, what we found out was BOSA said, no, that simply doesn't work for us. It doesn't work for us economically.
But the third player in all of this is Victoria City Council.
Yes.
And right now, this is being filmed on March 19th. Speaking to some other people this morning, I was told that what's going to happen next, possibly within 2 weeks, but certainly no sooner than 2 weeks, so early April at the earliest, this project will go to the City of Victoria...
The Land Use Committee.
Land Use Committee, for them to make some kind of a decision.
Yeah,
and the three people on that committee are the chairperson, Marianne Alto.
Yes.
Leslie...
Lisa Helps.
Lisa Helps.
Yeah. And Pamela Madoff.
And Pamela Madoff. Those are the three people. Okay.
That's
so they will make a decision about what?
Yes, so they will make a decision about whether the development is appropriate or not, whether it conforms to the city's bylaws, whether it conforms to the official community plan, where they'll take into consideration, we hope, the neighborhood association's concerns about the project, and we're hoping that they will encourage the developer to address the concerns that are raised by the neighborhood association.
Well, when I look at it, I think it's clearly what's being built is very much out of proportion for, as you said earlier, just about anything that's ever been done in Victoria.
Yeah, we really think it's a trial balloon in a sense. If this kind of half-block development can happen here, I don't think any neighborhood in Victoria will be able to say, well, that's unprecedented. You can't do that, come and do that in our neighborhood, because it will have a precedent for it. And so I think if this is the way we want to develop our neighborhoods with massive block-style development, where half a block with all the green space on the inside. So this is the other part of this development that we find really hard to take, is that it gives nothing in terms of green space to the community. It's all on the inside. The design was created, I think, with the developer thinking that the North Park neighborhood was a dangerous neighborhood, a neighborhood that the residents needed to be protected, and so they would provide the amenities of green space and livability on the inside of the development, whereas this hostile city streetscape was something to be avoided and protected from.
Well, I live in North Park, and
do you find it so? Dangerous?
No, I like the North Park area. It's very, very nice. I walk past that place, that site, that block all the time, and it's a very pleasant residential area. That will change completely if you've got a 6-story tall building there, right to the sidewalk, I guess, just about, and all the traffic, which won't come in off Pandora, which is already a busy street. The traffic is going to be brought in almost completely on Mason Street, which is a very, very quiet street, which will certainly mean that that street too will be the next one to have a 6-story tall, 1-block, huge development on it, and it'll just move. I mean, we've seen the developers destroy Vancouver, in my opinion, in many, many ways. We need, I think, better planning. We need to do things in a better way. We need to make things more livable, not less livable. And this project just doesn't seem to do that in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, you know, I think the traffic problem alone, I mean, there are so many problems with this development that it just, there is very little that you can say is redeeming about it. It has no redeeming aspects of the way it deals with traffic. It's going to be a huge problem for traffic. It's got 4,000 square foot of commercial space in it.
4,000 or?
4,000 square feet, 40,000 square feet.
40,000
square feet. They want to have a 32,000 square foot grocery store, for instance. You know, I know anybody who's familiar with Fairways down on Quadra Street knows that they need a large parking lot. That's a very busy place. It's a bit of a destination grocery store where people come and go a lot and they use their cars. And there's a grocery store already within a half a block of where this proposed development is. It's called Welburn's. There's also another one a couple of blocks away called Market on Yates. Whether we would really need another 32,000 square foot grocery store is really an open question. It also invites the question of, if we allow development to happen that will bleed out other commercial clients from existing commercial ventures, then are we really doing our neighborhoods and our commercial neighbors any favors by doing that? The other thing is, are we bringing in a lot of traffic to that neighborhood by having businesses that only bring traffic?
And this is density. I mean, this isn't density. This is density with a capital D. They're talking about how many units?
Well, so there's 200 units. There's 200 units in here. There's supposedly, at least at the start, going to be residential. They're going to be the rental units. So, but that doesn't necessarily mean they have to stay that way.
No, and I think they're building rental units because the market for condos right now is not there.
Exactly, and they'll readily admit that. The developer says that's their reasoning for building rental units, is because the condo market is down.
Yeah, and anybody who owns a condo in the city and ever wants to sell it, you know, if they start building rental, which they haven't built for years, I mean, people are going to start renting. They're not going to be paying the price for condo, so that's going to further knock down the condo market.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, the North Park Neighborhood Association has nothing against rental units. There's no problem with that, and we don't have a problem with appropriate density and appropriate development. We realize that something is probably going to happen to that block.
Okay, so they're planning 40,000 square foot of commercial and 200 units of rental. What would you like to see?
So we would like to see something that, at least along Mason Street, has 2 or 2.5 stories, 3 stories at the most, townhouses perhaps, with some green space, maybe some front lawns, certainly doable. On Pandora, it could probably be a little higher, a little denser. There could be existing. There is 3 stories further up on Pandora. There could be, say, 3 or 4 stories. Density currently allows for 5 stories, so that's a possible.
Now, it's also worth mentioning that the densities that are allowed are because this entire site has been moved out of the neighborhood in terms of zoning and given another classification, and Victoria City Council did that a while ago.
Yeah, fairly recently actually. There is that kind of density on the west side of Vancouver. So on the west side of Vancouver, between Vancouver and Quadra and Blanchard, there is definitely going to be some higher density. They're planning for that. On the east side of Vancouver, though, this is the only block that has this kind of density.
And prior to that, this was part of the more residential area.
It was part of the residential area, that's right.
So it looks like this has been planned for a while.
It does have that look to it. Yeah, it does look. It does have a look that, and I know from talking to some councillors that they knew that there was going to be problems, and there was even a comment that they voted against it because they knew there were going to be problems with the way density was going to line up against existing housing.
But it's still passed.
But it's still passed. Yeah. So, you know, the problems that we'll have when Mason Street confronts this 60-foot wall in front of it is that there's going to be a real loss of light. And one of the really charming things about that stretch of Mason Street, and I encourage everybody to go look at it, is that there is a wonderful little urban farm garden there. It's not an allotment garden, but it's a training center right now for aquaculture, so new ways of doing farming in the urban areas, which use less space and less soil. And so it's training young people how to do farming, something that is absolutely vital for our food security, that we pass on to the next generation, how to do farming and how to do it in different ways, in unique ways. And it's a wonderful, tidy little urban farm there that's a real treat. Well, with a 60-foot wall in front of it, its light is going to be cut considerably. It's going to have extreme devaluation of what it actually is.
Alan, I'm afraid we've only got 1 minute left. So I just like to tell people, there's been very little in the media about this, which, given my take on the media, isn't surprising. This is the development. I mean, all I want is what works, not what works for the developer, not what works for city council, who are desperately in need of money because of the way they've overspent in so many ways, but what works for the neighborhood and for all of us. Because if this development, as you said, is allowed to go ahead, then it sets the precedent, and it's not necessarily a good precedent. How do people get in touch with you or the group?
Yeah, well, you can get in touch with the North Park Neighborhood Association by just Googling North Park Neighborhood Association, and you can get in touch with me, agallupe@gmail.com.
How do you spell Gallupe?
Gallupe.
Gallupe
at gmail.com.
Yeah. I'm afraid we're out of time. Thank you so much for watching Citizens Forum. There are so many things happening. It's hard to keep track of them. Thank you, Alan, and thanks for watching Citizens Forum.